See, in our culture, when you get engaged, you get on your knee and supposedly, you get on your knee and you say, "Will you marry me?" And she says yes, and then you give her this ring and she puts it on her finger, and that means that you're engaged. You go through this period of preparation for the wedding. In Joseph's time, it wasn't so much a preparation for wedding as it was a preparation for a new family, a new life to come together. So when they became engaged, the father came over, his father and her father came together, and they negotiated what was called a bride price. Remember that, the dowries and stuff like that? They negotiated a bride price, and they negotiated that because she was of value. Like I joked about my wife that was cleaning the sidewalks, even though I did 99% of it, and I got the picture of her doing 1%. You know, people have great value because no longer do you, the more children you have, the less you had to hire. So for her to go and to live with another family meant that you lost a worker. So they would do the dowry to bring compensation to that loss. So Mary, you're a great woman, and you're worth 5 cows, a horse, and a sheep. That's what you're worth. And then when they came to that agreement, they said, all right, they're engaged. Then they did a short little ceremony. That short little ceremony was to tell everybody in Nazareth, which was about 200 people, that Joseph and Mary are now engaged. And so now Joseph went back to his house, Mary went back to her house, and then he started preparing for the new family. He had to start building a house. This is where Jesus comes up with this statement, "In my Father's house are many rooms. Do I not go there to prepare a place for you?" He was referring to the engagement period and the wedding. So during that time, Joseph is preparing the place where they're going to spend, hopefully, the rest of their lives. He builds this room onto the family compound called the insula. When that room was perfectly done and correct, then Joseph went to his father and said, "Now can I take my bride?" Sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Jesus going to the Father and saying, "Now is the time for my return to take my bride back." And he says yes or no. He can say no because he's saying, that house that you built is not perfect enough. Tear it down and start all over. Or he can say, now is the time. Joseph then went with his family and the wedding party to get married. It was unannounced. Does that sound familiar? When Jesus comes to take his bride, he will come unannounced. And then you got the parable of the 10 virgins. You got the 5 that were prepared, the 5 that were not prepared for the coming of the bridegroom. And so Mary had to be always ready, always waiting for Joseph to come. And she had her bridesmaids that always had to be ready, always waiting for them to come. And when the time came for the wedding, they then went and they picked her up and they took her on her shoulder, not like a feet sack, but properly. And they took her to Joseph's house. There they had a wedding feast. Remember, Jesus was at a wedding feast. And they celebrated that wedding. Mary and Joseph then went into, they're not married yet. See, in the Jewish family, marriage really was not complete until the union happened. It was not a ceremony, it was not so much a giving of the rings, but Mary and Joseph would go into the room that Joseph had just created, just built, and they would consummate the marriage while the party's going on outside. The best man and the maid of honor were standing at the door. Women, I know you're going to love this one. And when they had finished consummating the marriage, then Joseph would open the door and say, "It is finished." And then the best man would scream out, "They're married!" And everybody go, "Woo!" And they'd celebrate at that point. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't appreciate that too well. Aren't you glad things have changed?
Yes.
When Polly and I got married, our honeymoon night was at the Ramada Inn on Reynolds Road in Toledo, Ohio. Okay? It is now nothing. It is gone. But it became a Holiday Inn, and now it is a nothing there. And my aunt found out where we were staying, and all night long she called us on the phone. The problem with that is that the ringer was off. So we didn't know it until the next morning. The little flashers You know, once again, young, naive guy, why is this phone flashing? And so I pick up the phone. Why is my phone flashing? Oh, this gal named Miranda called you up. Or Lou Miranda called you up. Oh, really? How many times? About 20. Oh, really? What did she say? Oh, she finally gave up and said, have a good honeymoon. I mean, that's the closest we ever came to that. But you know what? Cultures are different. But this is what Joseph was looking forward to. Can you imagine all the preparation, all the excitement, and then all of a sudden, Mary comes up and says, oh, I got to talk. I'm pregnant. And Joseph goes, I was pure. You're not. Was it one of the soldiers? Because this is a garrison town. You know how soldiers act. No, what? Was it an old boyfriend? Whose child? God's. I've been a pastor for going on 28 years. We're going on 14 years here at this church. In my pastorate, I've heard many times when people justify things by giving it to God. My last church, I had a gal that started dating a guy that was actually older than her father. Now that's not wrong, that's not biblically wrong, but they moved in together, she had a child. And I remember when she came up to me, she's pregnant, they're still not married, and she says, I know God wanted this. See, we justify a lot of things in the sight of God. And here's Mary, in Joseph's eyes, justifying everything. And Joseph is saying, and now you're blaming God, you're blaspheming, you're giving God the credit for all this. And you know, what's this? How could you? But Joseph still loved Mary, and so he decided he was going to divorce Mary. In that culture, when you were engaged and you broke off the engagement, it had to be a very good reason behind it. And usually infidelity was the main one. And what they would do, in the Bible, many people think that Mary could have been stoned. Probably not with the Romans there. But boy, you can embarrass her. They didn't have Facebook back then. You know how we do it on Facebook when you break up with someone? That's the biggest jerk on the face of the earth. Yeah, jerk over here. And they go back and forth and they post pictures and everything else. Back then, all you did when you lived in a town of 200, you just stood around and said, excuse me, notice the problem here? And then the embarrassment would come about, and then they would scorn her and all. I'm glad some of those things have changed. Joseph decided he was going to divorce her quietly. He was going to take her to the priest, and they were going to have a short little statement that she was divorced. That night, before it happened, it's amazing how God seems to wait to the last moment on some things. Did you ever notice that? Why does God always wait to the last moment? Tell me now. And Joseph is in a dream. And an angel of the Lord came to him in a dream. I've had people from time to time say, what is it about dreams? Why does God use dreams sometimes? It's real simple. During times of dreaming, you're not distracted by anything else. You don't have the noise. And dreaming is important. Scientists have found out the importance of dreaming. You've got to have that REM time. Well, anyway, the angel of the Lord came to him in a dream and said, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife. What she says is true. What is in her stomach, what is conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit. And the Bible says that Joseph then woke up and did exactly what he was told and took Mary home as his wife. Interesting statement in verse 24 says, and he did not consummate the marriage until after Jesus was born. In other words, he kept her pure. I think that's an important statement. It's important in a lot of ways, but it's also important in the rest of the sermon that I'm going to give to you. Here's what I want us to bring out. What Joseph expounds is how we should be not only as fathers, but we should also be as Christians. We should be living a life of, it's not about me, it's about thee. If I were to say the number one issue is in the church, the number one issue is in any family, in the family, it is when we develop the attitude of it's about me. When it's about me, that's when trouble usually starts. Because when it's about me, because me can never be satisfied. Now I'm talking about a normal situation here. Okay, I'm not talking about a guy or a gal that every time you come home there's a frying pan that's being flown. That's something totally different. I'm talking about a normal situation here. But if you really want to grow in your Christian walk, if you want to be righteous, if you want to grow in your love relationship with your spouse, if you want to love in your love relationship with your children, if your children, if you want to grow in your love relationship with your family, you got to develop this attitude. It's not about me. You remember that when on The Incredibles, there's this one scene in the Disney movie The Incredibles. Love that movie. The Disney movie The Incredibles, where this superhero guy is going through a midlife crisis, and finally the wife turns around to him and says, "It's not about you." That, my friends, is the key. That's the key about the church. That's the key about worship. That's the key about you name it. That's the key. It's not about me. It's about thee. And that's where Joseph was able to overcome this. Because look at this. Mary got the angelic visit. Joseph did not. This is not my baby. It's God's baby. I desired a total wife. I did not get it. I desired a honeymoon. I did not get it. I desired my reputation. I'm not going to have it. Because when I marry her and bring her in, guess what I'm saying to all 200 people in Nazareth? Woohoo! Guess whose baby it is? And if I go up and say, "Oh, by the way, it's not my baby, it's God's." Yeah, right. They're going to say the same thing that Joseph thought about Mary. It's all gone. All my plans are gone. Now I, Joseph, have this baby. I'm to be the father. The child is not mine.